Try to put as much miles as possible in the car.
That's good. We'll put you something with it.
Yeah. Gotta be. Yeah. Camping, hiking. Yes. All three citizens. Man, right there.
In the world, but not to make him.
How are you? Good, good.
Oh, they're trying on science.
Just so you understand, I think that citizenship in the community is the most important thing in America.
So she would have grabbed here.
Put things into the card. One of the required work is that it's going to go.
Oh, okay.
Ask a question. Not just attend the meeting.
He did school board
Yeah?
for World. Yep. He attended the school boards this summer. And then he got to the station because someone that because he was a teacher. And of course, had to present. He worked hard for it. That
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tabernacle Township Committee meetings for August 27, 2018. Please rise for a flag salute.
The allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is called pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law of August 27, 2018. Was sent to the Central Record, Burlington County Times, and the Victoria Post. Also on the bulletin board in Town Hall, it has been named continuously for the required notices under the statute. In addition, a copy of this notice has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. We have roll call. Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Francis.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
Mayor Barton.
Present. Okay, we're going to start off. We have a presentation. Brian Marley is here. And Paul Forlenzo. I'm sorry.
Close enough, yep.
Okay, and our Chief Deputy Executive Director. And gentlemen, the floor is all yours.
Yes. Thank you. Members of the Township Committee, good evening. My name is Paul Forlenzo. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening in regards to your renewal in the TabernacleOG. You folks are, believe it or not, wrapping up your 18th year in the Sun, which is 2001. I took a look back earlier today. And I see that you have on your agenda this evening your renewal. So we look forward to your continued membership in the fund. And I guess my goal this evening is in the next 2 minutes not to say anything whatsoever. I'll make the second short. I do have prepared remarks. I do want to highlight just a few pages. I know you have a full agenda. You got a lot of things going on, so I don't want to belabor the point. But there are 3 buildings, just a few things I'd like to point out in regards to the membership fund. I'm happy to report to you that the JIP movement in the state of New Jersey is doing extremely well. If you take a look on page 3, you'll see that over the last 30 plus years since the first JIPs were created in the mid-1980s, the JIP movement has saved the taxpayers in New Jersey in excess of $1.3 billion. So it's by far the greatest example of interlocal cooperation in the state's history. Take a look on page 4, focusing a little bit more on what's going on locally in the borough. You'll see that we're in our 27th year of operation. We currently have $11.6 million in surplus and in excess of $16.9 million of cash on hand. You might be saying to yourself, gee, that seems like a lot of surplus, a lot of money. Well, it is. But quite honestly, we have a lot of exposures in the Borough Code JIF, and we never want to be in a position where we need to come back to you and ask for additional dollars because we didn't put enough money in our local annual budget to be able to pay our bills. So the Finance Committee is very judicious in the way they return money, surplus, back to our members, and you'll see that noted on page 5. Since our inception, we've returned an excess of $8 million back to our member municipalities, including $700,000 last year. And the JIF will be acting in August on a resolution to authorize at least an additional $700,000 to be released. Specifically, you'll see Tabernacle has received an excess of $62,000, including $11,000 last year. The strength of the funds financially has been recognized by the fund actuary, who must certify to the state each year that we put enough money into our budget to cover our expected losses. And you'll see that on page 6. Over the last several years, because of the overall membership's good performance, we've been able to reduce our loss funding portion of our budget. Now that promises is deep as only go into JIF operations. Loss funding is basically what we pay on claims before they go into excess layers. Currently, we're paying the first $300,000 of a workers' compensation loss when one employee gets injured on the job, and the first $300,000 of an auto or a general liability loss, a trip and fall on your sidewalk or one of your municipally owned vehicles running into another vehicle. And the first $100,000 of property loss. And that's the main component of our budget. And the fact that we continue to reduce that budget year after year, I think, bodes well for the fund's overall membership. We allocate that loss funding component of the budget across the membership based upon your performance. Those towns that have more claims or pay a higher percentage of that total, and towns that have lesser claims pay a smaller amount. You can see on page 7, Tabernacle continues to perform extremely well. You have a loss ratio of 14% over the last 6 years. We look at a 6-year rolling average because it's really not fair to judge a municipality's performance on 1 year, because 1 year you could have a lot of losses and you could have a very high loss ratio, and other years you could have very few losses and a very small loss ratio. So we look at that 6 years, and you can see in comparison to the overall JIF, you're doing extremely well. We ask you to continue to keep up the good work. And that performance is reflected on page 8. When you look at your loss funding, again, that is a major component of your overall assessment. You can see that other than 2015, where we had an addition of some significant exposures, you folks are seeing a downward trend in your loss funding, and that is also reflected on page 9 in your overall assessment. So you guys will continue to perform well, and we want to continue to see that. We ask you to continue to promote your chief risk management team in town, including Brian and Doug and Will Sean and all of your folks. They do a very good job for you, and they really allow us to run this JIF on about 12 cents of every dollar. So whereas a typical insurance company in the commercial market is anywhere from 35 to 38, sometimes 40 cents on the dollar, we're able to run this fund on about 12 cents of every dollar. So we continue to do well. What's also nice about the fund is that on page 12, you'll see our 27 members. We've grown over the last several years. What's nice is that JIF can provide services to towns as small as Fieldsboro or Bass River, as large as Mountain Laurel and Pemberton Township. So we're really able to provide services that towns of all types, sizes, and shapes and exposures have. So that's one nice thing about the fund. I mentioned earlier, your risk management team is highlighted on page 14. We ask you to continue to support them. I'm not saying it just because Doug's sitting here, but he does a very good job. He represents your town well. He's the chair of our safety committee, and he's involved at the MEL level, which is the upper echelon of the insurance coverages at the state level. So he does a good job on your behalf. You should be proud of that. Some things we're working on. I know tonight you're going to be looking at some modifications to your employment practices and public officials liability policies and procedures. That is part of the program that we update once every 2 years. So I'm happy to see that you're undertaking that. And Doug was briefing me on the manager's supervisor's training that you're participating in. Also on page 17, we recently announced the MEL Cyber Risk Management Program. We're recognizing that towns are spending a lot more on technology and utilizing technology a great deal more in their day-to-day activities. And with that comes the risk of being hacked or having your network taken down or being held for ransom. So this program that's highlighted on page 17, if you come into compliance with those standards, you will see a reimbursement of your deductible as noted. So that's something we want to encourage you to continue to undertake. Also, we ask you to continue to support our wellness program. The Borough Code JIF is one of only 3 JIFs in the state of New Jersey that has a full-blown wellness program. You might think to yourself, well, does that make a whole lot of sense? Well, it really does, because over the last 25 years, national studies have indicated healthy employees are less likely to be injured, and when they are, they recover much more quickly. And when you consider the fact that the lion's share of our budget goes to workers' comp, employee injuries, anything we can do to get our employees as healthy as possible is just going to pay off in dividends down the road. Not only that, it's also going to have a side benefit on your health benefits line item, because obviously your health benefits line is judged upon your use of it. If you can keep your employees healthy, hopefully that will pay off there as well. And you'll see that demonstrated on page 19 with an actual claims scenario that came out of this joint insurance fund. And you can see where the fact that the employee, one of the employees was much healthier than the other, really paid off. Just a couple of last minute things that we're working on, so you're likely to see them come across your desk in the next month or two. I'll highlight on page 21. We're starting to see more and more claims come out of land use boards and land use decisions. So we're in the process of putting together a risk management and training program that'll be available to your land use board members, and also some additional technology risk management services that you'll be seeing come through. We've just let out contracts with 2 firms that'll be providing training to your employees on how to handle scenarios, not to click on the wrong emails, how to stop viruses before they get started, also pinging your networks to see if we can take your network down, if there's any open ports and the like. So you'll see more information coming on that. Finally, in the back, you'll see your annual report card. This is something to provide you on an annual basis on the yearly renewal that you come out and just kind of lay it out for you a little bit. If you open up on the left-hand side, you'll see our financials as of June 30th, 2018. You'll also see how our budget is broken out and our operational expenses and the like. On the right-hand side, you'll see a number of programs that as members of the fund you have access to, including your optional safety budget, your safety incentive program, your EPL and cyber risk management program, and the like. And then below that, you'll see some metrics. These are metrics that the fund utilizes to judge your individual performance versus the JIT's overall performance. And you can see that Tabernacle is doing well in compared to the overall fund. So with that, I'm happy to not say another word or answer any questions that you may have.
Anyone from the board have any questions of Mr. Forenza?
Thank you for your time.
Any professionals, any questions? Doug, as the trip coordinator, would thank you. Of course, we have a new OEM coordinator, Bob Sutton, is here. He is also our safety coordinator. And also want to thank Lisa Love for her work on the board, and thank you, Brian, for your help with us also.
Will the public be able to answer?
Yeah, we can open it to the public quickly, not extended, but yeah, one question.
That's fair. I do thank you.
Sure. We don't think we have consensus amongst the committee to open it to the public.
I don't think you should.
I don't think so, no. That's what public comments were. At least that's my opinion.
Okay. You could, we'll ask you to say with this comment. Would you stay around until we have our public comment period?
Sure.
And if there's anything, we can let you read afterwards.
That'd be great.
Okay, report of the Public Safety Director. Mr. Brisky.
Just real quick, from the Public Safety Department, Chief Jackson's here. He's got some positive news this evening. Do you want to just announce?
Chief Jackson, Tabernacle Rescue Squad. Tabernacle Rescue Squad applied for I believe it's technically the 2017 Fire Act grant, and this past month we were awarded $91,000 in a federal grant to replace all the SCBAs on the rescue truck and some additional equipment, face masks and stuff like that. It's a matching grant. We have to match 5% of the grant, so it's like $4,600 that we can spend. The total grant is $91,000. So very excited to get that. That'll replace all those SCBAs that are expiring on the rescue truck.
George, for those of us who don't know what an SCBA is.
Self-contained breathing apparatus. That will replace all those that are on the rescue truck, and hopefully some additional equipment with it. So just wanted to share that with the committee. Thank you.
Congratulations. That's a grant directly through the Tabernacle Rescue Squad. It doesn't involve the township at all. This is helpful. We have a couple ordinances, public safety issue ordinances on this evening. The first one we have is the public events ordinance that is on for second reading. There'll be a public hearing on that. And Bob, you'll be hanging around for any questions on that, because maybe you were instrumental in that. Second one is you have a speeding ordinance for New Road. One of the things that the administrator and myself have been working on, and I know there was a complaint last meeting regarding some speeding issues and getting some speed signs. I know that Doug had talked to some other towns about getting a speed sign. I guess you want to update them on that?
Southampton no longer has those available. They're in the process of replacing them.
So one of the things that we're looking to do is, most likely for the township, if we can afford to purchase one by the end of the year, move some monies around. We're just looking for prices now, getting a fair price for a speed sign that we can move to different parts of the community and work with, make sure to respond to complaints and make people aware of their signage. Obviously, there's no enforcement with it, but a lot of times the educational part of it is worthwhile, and just getting people aware of their speeds in certain areas, especially in the residential neighborhoods, where people don't realize how fast they're going sometimes. As you've all received, and it's in the public, a copy of my quarterly report. A couple issues I just wanted to point out was, it brought up some issues of the useful life of your vehicles. I think you're well within the scope of your useful life, except for the fire chief's vehicle, which is scheduled for replacement in early next year, most likely. Equipment needs, one of the, we looked at the equipment needs of rescue. Obviously, we had talked just briefly about this last meeting, we have more than enough rescue equipment and how we need to look at that and address that in the future, and then obviously focusing on shared services. And when we utilize, especially tankers, I think that tanker trucks are an obvious need for this community, and we must make sure that in our planning processes that we coordinate with Southampton and Chemung, the towns around us that do have to have water tankers, that we purchase them and have them in service. And I've already met with the fire chief regarding response to make sure that when we're responding to active fires, residential fires, that we are responding in a mutual aid situation, so we do have that response done correctly and with the equipment that's needed and water that's needed. And that's one of the most important things, is getting water on the scene of any type of active fire. The other thing is, I had requested a look at ordinance 2011-3, the way it read regarding the control of rescue, and you can see in my report, without exception, everyone I've spoken to in the community speaks of the problem in coordination, it seems, with the rescue. I know that Mr. Lang has addressed it in a proposed ordinance that is somewhat broad, and I don't know if everyone has that ordinance in front of them yet.
No, we were not going to introduce that tonight much. What we wanted to do is have you give your report, and I know you're talking about a joint task force for rescue.
Right.
And we'd like to hear how you would like to proceed with that ordinance.
Well, one of the things I'd like to do is I'd like to get a joint working group between the fire department and the rescue squad, and sit down over the next 30 days and get their input, and let's have some discussions about, and everybody I've talked to, they said that the task force concept worked. It worked very well. Something has broken down there, and where I'd like to get the working group together and say, okay, how do we fix this? How do we get this working? And then I'll get with Peter to see how we can either do it in this form or do it in some other form where we can get them working in the same direction. And that's my biggest concern, just getting them working closer together.
Okay. It appears by the ordinance that we wrote, you have the ability and power to do that, to assemble, if it's fire, rescue, EMS, and see if you can get them all on the same page and come up with a way that we can provide those services. As you remember, this committee unanimously, when we went to a public safety director, we wanted to find out what's the cost of fire, rescue, EMS, what's the budgets of those organizations, where are they spending their money, are there surpluses, also, what resources are required to deliver the services at Tabernacle residents. and taking advantage of the fact that there's mutual aid that other towns can provide us.
Right.
We provide your mutual aid to others, but what's the real number of resources that we need to service our residents, not the rest of the surrounding communities, and take advantage of that mutual aid? And then how do we deliver those services at the lowest cost possible? So hopefully, Arch, in the future, you can work on that, and we can get to a point in time where we understand what it's costing us, and are there ways that we can deliver those services?
And we've captured most of that information, the financials, and looking at that, and looking at different options on how we can, we know there's certain excesses, and we don't want to incur the additional costs of maintenance and repair of those. So that's one of the things we were definitely looking to down, and then working with both groups, of looking at, the thing is with the Tabernacle Rescue Squad is they're basically self-sustaining in the sense of their operations, except for obviously the building. We'll be meeting with their executive board to discuss that in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to look at different options and reductions in the fire department, looking closely at their budget, how we can reduce that, and if there's equipment reductions that we can do there. And in the planning process, we are looking at the regional aspects of it, like I already did with the water tenders. And we have a ladder, Southampton doesn't have a ladder, and how we respond. And again, we're looking at EMS on the same side of their responses, and if there's an impact on the community on Tabernacle. But I will say one thing about Tabernacle Township: it is well protected. There's more than enough service, it has enough equipment, and the people who volunteer do their job very well.
So Arch, are you going to be inviting the different organizations to meet to discuss how you put this task force together?
Yeah, I want to get I'll get with the fire chief, I'll get with the rescue chief. We'll set up a committee, just not them. I want to have different levels of people, the operational people, and let's sit down and see how we can come to some solutions here, and making sure that we build respect for each other and can work together like we did in the task force process before.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Lee and Committeeman Yates, looked at emergency services quite a while ago, and if they would be willing, I would like to see the committee also be represented on that committee. Would you guys be willing to do that, or would someone else like to sit in on that?
Sure. I'd be willing to do it, and the only problem is it'd have to be at night for me.
Yeah, looks like it's going to be for nights for everybody.
Okay.
All right, let me see what I can look at. Very good.
Any questions from the committee for?
Arch, I've just got one other, if I may, Mayor, just one other point. At our next meeting, if we can get a review of where we are in terms of the building conditions of the ESB and also the firehouse, we have, just if there's any major capital improvements we need to make there, or where we are in terms of the maintenance of both.
I can tell you right off the bat with the emergency services building, there are some upgrades we are just working on, locking systems, mechanisms like that. The building itself is in excellent shape, as it should be. We are having some air conditioning problems there. Has that been resolved? That was mine. Yeah, that we were having some flooding. The firehouse, we're in the process of replacing part of the driveways. We were having some cracking that the GFS made a recommendation upon. So that's being addressed. And then we'll look at capital planning going into 19 with if there's anything major that needs to be done there.
Chris, what about the building on New Road? Does it have security cameras? Is that fully secured? And what's your thoughts on it?
No, we are actually, Bob and I have had that discussion. We're looking to put some forms of security systems in there. Just, I think it's just a safety thing anymore, and making sure there's no problems.
Okay. The firehouse does have, right? The firehouse is secured?
Yes.
Anyone else from the committee? No? Okay. Okay, we're going to open the Public Safety Director's report to the public. Anyone from the public have a report on the public safety? Questions about the report?
General public comment, are we doing this?
No, we usually open up, since we don't ask the public safety director to stay for the whole meeting. Any questions of the public safety director from the public? Mrs. Brooks, I see.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor, I just want to point out, we're going to open up for various public comments during the agenda. I think we ought to have it on the agenda itself. So we're going to fully inform that we're going to have multiple public comment periods.
Well, since we've had a public safety director, we've opened his report up to comments so that he doesn't have to sit through the whole meeting. If we want him to sit through the whole meeting, we can just include it in public comments. But get Mrs. Brooks.
Thank you. Fran Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. I'd just like to ask Mr. Liston in regards to his statement about getting fire and rescue together, with fire and TRS together with regard to rescue. How does the $91,000 grant that was received by the Tabernacle Rescue Squad, how does it fit into this plan that Mr. Liston has just outlined? It's not a detailed plan, I recognize, but his plan to work on getting the two entities together.
Actually, I just learned about this grant this evening.
Okay,
So
fair enough.
one of the things, well, we're looking to do is obviously, if he can replace, he has a need for replacing certain equipment anyway. So we'll have funds to replace those into their rescue vehicle, which is obviously at their cost. But that would be considered in the overall bigger project.
Does that rescue vehicle belong to them or to the township?
That belongs to us, right, George?
The truck itself belongs to the
us.
township.
Okay, so the equipment is, some of the equipment or all of it belongs to them? Okay, just needed that clarified. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we're going to do public comment on agenda items only. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Stuart Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. Two quick questions for Mr. Valenza. One, thanks for the presentation, very succinct. More than that, it was informative. Good to learn that information. The first quick question, you mentioned MEL twice. It's an acronym, I don't know what it stands for.
Municipal Excess Liability Joint Insurance Fund. It's a JIF made up of 19 other JIFs around the state of New Jersey. And they buy excess coverage for 500 plus public entities on an annual basis. It's a group cooperative purchasing control.
And the next question has to do with road improvement. Gets to another subject that the committee is considering. It's Carranza Road. What sort of, Carranza Road is a road that hasn't really been maintained that well. It's off to the side of the township. It's in really, really bad shape. I'm wondering what's the risk to the township of its position?
Is it a township road or is it a county road?
Yes.
It's both.
Both.
The portion that's referred to is township right now.
So a portion of it is Tabernacle Township, a portion of it is Shimon Township, and there is jurisdictional disagreement that it does not belong to the state of New Jersey once it reaches the state.
Wow. And I think because of those difficulties and perhaps others, it hasn't received the maintenance that it should. It's a hazard. So what risks do we all face?
Well, if somebody hits a pothole and has an accident, certainly we can bring a claim against the fund, but we'll certainly defend Tabernacle or Shimon or whoever else is named. That's our job. But obviously we want to continue to promote regular maintenance on everything so that it's less likely to have accidents.
My other comment is also on Carranza Road. And this gets to the engineer's report. You asked Mr. Guzzi to report on Carranza Road. And the last meeting, there was considering the second application to DOT. But instead, at that meeting, we asked Mr. Guzzi to explore repaving Carranza Road to where it ends. Although where it ends was never defined, it seemed to me that that was Route 529, which right at Lee Brothers Farms. And that change made a simple 1.5 mile paving job that solves our problems into what I calculate to be about a 9-mile project that involves new road construction, triggers stormwater management, extensive permitting, and probably a lot of other costs. Now I'm concerned we're going back to where we were before. What I mean is, when at budget time, when the initial road improvements were discussed for budget purposes, this committee wisely backed off of the roads that were mentioned because, one, they were in better shape than Carranza, and two, some of those roads were, frankly, they serve people who work for Tabernacle, and instead, or were associated with Tabernacle, and instead, you asked Mr. Guzzi to provide a long-range road improvement plan based on need. So the problem with extending Carranza Road to Speedwell and 529 is it's not on Mr. Guzzi's recommended road improvement plan. It doesn't show up on the county's master plan. It doesn't even show up on Tabernacle's master plan. So there's just not a need for that road. And I think it's a bad idea per se.
If you have some questions, I'd like to hear your questions, but Mr. Guzzi looked into what it would cost to do that. The committee has not agreed to do that. It was something that we said we would take a look at.
I understand.
And I'm sure he'll report on where we are with Carranza Road.
Since his report is on the agenda, and since it's expected that he will report on that as asked, I would like these comments to be before you so that you can consider them.
So do you have a question? Just your time is up. Do you have some questions you want us to address? Or?
In all fairness, I think my time is up because there's been some dialogue with others who have answered the questions
Mr. Brooks, when they answer, I do stop. I push it every time. I give you your full 3 minutes of speaking.
Time's up.
No, I'm just saying,
If I may, you
I
have any
think I
questions?
interrupted.
Yeah, your time's up.
Yeah, do you have any
Well,
questions?
you routinely grant more time to, I would say.
Do you have
everybody else.
questions? With all the comments you made, we're already aware of that. You repeated what we've heard before, that we know before, and we will address those. But if you have a question, we'll be happy to answer your question.
Okay, my question is this. Why would you consider extending a road and multiplying the cost of this project by what is probably going to be a huge amount, a much more costly amount, when A, there hasn't been a traffic report on it, B, Mr. Yates has already said that it's going to be a shortcut. Your engineer has also said that it's going to increase speeds. And the existing Carranza Road is narrow, has no shoulders, is full of deer. Why would you do that? And if you would discuss those issues, and you discuss the report in this project, I would appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Anyone else have questions? Mrs. Brooks?
Road. I have just a couple of comments, quick comments actually. Resolution 2018-90, the closed session resolution, that has not been transmitted to my attorney. He doesn't know anything about it and hasn't received a copy of it, and that's all I want to say about that. Secondly, on resolution 2018-92, it's my understanding based on reviewing the July 23rd meeting recording that Mr. Haynes, and welcome, is an acting chief financial officer. In the resolution, it uses whereas the chief financial officer, it needs to be corrected. And this is a simple administrative thing that I would hope people who are looking at these resolutions, I don't know if you wrote it, Mr. Lang, would take note of and edit carefully. My third comment also has to do with the engineer's report. I listened to the July 23rd meeting. The resolution 2018-82 had to do with the discretionary grant that Mr. Guzzi was about to submit and was looking for permission. There was the motion was made, it was seconded, there was discussion about it, and clearly the discussion was extremely chaotic. But one of the things that's clear from the recording, there was never any tabling of the motion. nor was there an amendment proposed to that resolution. And as a result, 3 people voted for that resolution. It's very clear from the recording. Ms. Brown, Mr. Franzen, and Mr. Lee actually voted for that resolution. And so that resolution passed, yet when it came to Mr. Yates, and there was no amendment, no proposal to table it before that discussion, before it started. And so it was actually a legal resolution. It passed, it had a quorum, and yet you went on to continue, and you continued to discuss for at least 9 minutes questions that Mr. Yates raised, and questions that were brought up by Mr. Lee, and statements regarding bringing the road, looking into the cost of the road down to Speedwell. The problem with that is it's a violation of Robert's Rules of Order, and secondly, you passed the resolution, so that resolution has legal authority, and what didn't have legal authority was for the committee to go ahead and instruct Mr. Guzzi to come up with new calculations, which, clearly benefit Mr. Guzzi, but don't benefit us because of the cost of that. So you've got multiple things going on, and I think in the past, you need to be a little bit more careful. I was hoping, Mr. Lang, that I wasn't there, so I was hoping you might say something, Mr. Lang, but you never brought up the fact that there was a vote taken, and it was passed by a quorum of the committee. So that's one other thing, and just really quickly, there seems to just be this, it appears to be, and I'm not saying it is, it appears that there's a bait and switch on this road business. There's a lot of delay going on. We just need to take care, Mr. Brooks said, we just need to take care of the road and correct it. It's been going on over 30-some years. It's dangerous. And we've been gracious and paid for everybody else's roads. It's time to take care of Comanza. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else, public comments? Okay, we're going to close the public comments and approval of the bills.
So moved, I have a question.
Second.
All the steel toe boots we bought, 2 pairs plus MSLs, is that in direction from the safety committee?
Construction office and public works department.
Any other questions? Okay, roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Now, approval of minutes of regular and executive for July 23rd, 2018.
So moved.
Any questions? Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
I'm going to say yes, and that's up to 10:15.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, old business, we have the second reading of ordinance 2018-3, an ordinance repealing and replacing Article 8 of the Township Code, entitlement, public function, and similar uses of the public places. This is a public hearing. So we're going to open this up to the public. Anyone from the public have any comments on this ordinance 2018-3? Mrs. Brooks?
Brian Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. I just have a few questions about the 300-person number and how that was determined. What factors were considered when what you took into consideration to come up with that 300-person number? What if an organization says we're not going to have that many people, and then they hold an event and it turns out that they have 300 plus people, but they have never gotten a permit? How are you going to control that? How are you gonna address it? Is there a retroactive application if it turns out? Who's gonna monitor the number of people? How are you gonna monitor it? There's just a lot to address here that hasn't quite been clarified in this ordinance, and I think it would be advantageous to people. I don't like to be cynical about human beings, but it's easy to be cynical about human beings. So somebody could say, oh, we're not gonna have 300 people on that bike ride, but it turns out that they get a lot of late registrations and they end up with 400 people on the bike ride. How are you gonna control that? And there's just nothing in the ordinance that, there's no language in the ordinance, no provisions that enable you to do that or to apply a permit to a retroactively. So I would ask that you take a closer look at that before you approve this ordinance. Because once you put it into, it's already been noticed. So, but those are genuinely good answers and questions, and I'd like to hear the rationale for how you came up with 300 people. Thank you.
Well, Mrs. Brooks, I will say that there is a violations and penalties section to that ordinance to handle anyone that does not file for the permit under those numbers. I know originally we were talking about 500. Bob, originally we were looking at 500, then we reduced it to 300?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And do you have a reason why we went to?
We're moving up so smaller venues like church services, some of those other things wouldn't fall under it.
I think it was originally 250.
Yeah, it's 250.
Okay, we raised it to 3.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I didn't see that it made a big difference, 50 persons one way or another. And the exceptions for houses of worship and schools that have their own events kind of took care of that issue. But it makes a more significant event need the permit, minor events less so.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Brooks?
Thank you. Stuart Brooks, Morse Meadow Road. My comments are on the same subject. After reading the ordinance, I was wondering how one might distinguish between those events that require a permit and those that don't. And first off, it seemed like the only one that would meet this threshold would be the church's summer festival. Right, thank you. I don't know how many events would actually be captured by this. I'm assuming, of course, the capture is good because it prevents emergency management of large functions. My second thought was that perhaps the factor that should be considered is parking availability. And maybe there's a threshold of how many cars can Tabernacle handle before they begin to create safety problems. I didn't know the answer to that, but that's a thought as to what factor might be the trigger, not just 500 seem too big, 250 seem too small. Maybe that's a way of working up a rationale that it sort of comes close to the problems you anticipate. And another thought I had was perhaps the ordinance should be specific as to whether or not staff is included in the count. If there's an event that needs a lot of staff, I don't know what that would be, then those people are already coming into Tabernacle, to that central spot. And maybe just 100 additional participants would get them over the threshold and would warrant a permit. Whereas perhaps if there are a lot of staff, but they're dispersed all over the township, maybe at checkpoints on a bike ride or a motocross event, or I don't know what else, maybe that doesn't matter as a factor. So those are thoughts that I had as to how this ordinance might be tailored to be more effective so that it doesn't bring in the small groups for whom you don't want to burden with a permit. But it would bring in groups of a large enough size that you do want information about, that you do want to coordinate your OEM with. And I pass that on to you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Anyone else? Come along.
William Lowe, 24 Hidden Acres Drive, Tabernacle. I feel like I'm on a trip to Abilene. You know, that's one of those things, where everybody stands around and says, what do we want to do tonight? And everybody says, well, let's go to Abilene. And they get to Abilene and they say, what do you want to do now? I guess we'll go home. They say, go home. It's not a trip to Abilene. I'm looking at this thing and thinking, I'm at fault for starting this trip.
No, you're not.
And maybe it needs to be slowed down a little bit. The original purpose of the request for the notification was really simple. An event that's advertised, that has the potential to bring in a large number of people into Tabernacle that would not normally be here, so that emergency management and emergency services would know that it's going to happen. And they could make contact and coordinate with the people that are doing the event. At the same time, emergency management and public safety is required to notify Homeland Security, both the county and the state, and the state police to coordinate the fact that something like this is going on and it's a potential target. The idea was it was a potential target. I have a problem with exceptions for any of these. I have a problem with what's the number, whether it should be 50, whether it should be 75. What's the real key thing is it's a large event that's unusual, that calls people to come into the township that would not normally come here. I think a graduation exercise at the elementary school or the middle school is one of those events. I think that a robotic competition at Seneca is one of those events. I think that the Holy Eucharist event is one of those things. The Urban Promise bike ride is a classic. But it's not necessary that you have 5-paragraph field order and all kinds of paperwork going with it. I don't know why you even want one to have a $75 processing fee. It makes no sense. What you really want is for these organizations that are out there, to include TAA, to tell emergency management, tell public safety, we're going to have an event. And then they can start asking the questions. It's worked out somewhere and it worked out not. We're surprised sometimes because of the size of the event. What I would like to do is see, what my thought was, reduce the surprise so we would be able to be forewarned so we could be prepared. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel. Any other questions from the public? Debate?
Keith, 14 Richter Road. I'm part of the head of the Tabernacle Fall Festival that's coming up very soon. The township is on board. Emergency services are on board. We're working with our entire town to make this an event. We now have an additional cost going into this. We have additional planning that needs to go into this because when you pass this, I assume it's going to be fairly quickly, that it'll be enacted, if I'm correct. We're working on now having to pay a trooper to show up, which again cuts into the money that is available through the nonprofit, through the activity that's going on. And I also now look at this, reading more of it. We have 3 camps right here in Tabernacle Township. And having been part of one of them for quite a while, they easily can draw 300 people on a night. And that's a night of the week on a regular service. Are we now going to step in and say, we need plans? Because any night of the week, on a Sunday night, their tabernacle could have 400 or 500 people in it. I understand when it's a large concert, they used to have a fairly well-known group come in. What about when the seniors go to Innuendoin? How many seniors and teachers are there? Is there a plan for that now is going to have involved? Pine Hill has different events, camporees and things like that, where people coming and going. You're talking about private organizations that are within their private property, but
as Colonel Lowe said, are targets for large groups of people. I understand that we need to definitely look into it with our situation, with our event that's coming up. I've already been on the phone with Ms. Bodarina from the Lenape District because they have now aware of this and we're discussing this, but there are plans now that we're going to have to look into. We're on the grounds. We don't leave the grounds. We don't overfill the grounds. I do understand that this is coming from a big event that occurred that overflowed the entire school property. And so these are things we definitely have to be looking at and be aware of. Thank you.
Mr. Zane, where does it say on here that you're required to hire a state trooper? I'm looking at the ordinance, and I read it this morning, and you just mentioned that you're...
School told us we had to.
You're required now to
Yep.
hire a state trooper.
School told us.
Okay, well, that has nothing to do with us.
But it does, because now all this security and all the permitting and stuff. I just spoke with her today, and I received an email from her today that we have to have a police presence on the property.
Have you read this?
I looked at whatever's in the folder.
Okay. There's no requirement in here to have a trooper assigned to any event. I just want to clarify that.
Okay. But now they're requiring, based on the number of people, where it was never before, and now we have to have a security officer from the school also present, that was never before, because they're covering their butts, obviously, with what's going on.
I think that's a good idea.
I don't know. I haven't really thought a lot about it, because it literally got the call this afternoon. We've had presidents before, but they've been invited guests to be present at the event. I have seen other events where they're not there because either they're not aware of it beforehand or they weren't invited as the type of event that it might be. Particularly maybe the lacrosse tournament that occurred, they may not, there would be no reason necessarily for them to be there, I guess, unless it was pushed by the school as it is being now.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Keith, just so I understand the types of events that you're referencing at the camps, just so I can understand how they would dovetail into this.
Well, they could have 100 campers present,
Right, for camp.
For a camp,
Right.
and then they have 50 staff, and they have a nightly, particularly Sunday nights and Wednesday night tend to be the nights that the families or churches or people would come to visit for the night, and you could end up with 300 or 400 people, depending on
to camp with their children and that kind
yeah,
of thing.
yeah, or churches make it their Wednesday night Bible study or their Sunday night. It could be a concert that someone was putting on. The group that's already there, they may be doing music, things like that.
I'm not sure that those events, and it's a healthy discussion to have, I'm not sure that those events would be public events within the meaning of this, the distinguishing factor being that they're not held on public property or in the public right-of-way, and they're not advertised where the public is invited.
Well,
so
they're not advertised in the open public.
Well, okay.
Meaning like a flyer would go out or in the newspaper. It's just known that churches are obviously welcome to come and participate and show up for it.
Right. So,
but it does say that on private property.
Right, and that's why I'm saying I'm not sure that they would fit into needing a permit. But that's why I wanted to try to understand that event that you're talking about. And so one of the distinguishing factors in the ordinance is that it be on public land or in the public right-of-way, or that it be advertised where the public, the general public is invited.
Which is not the case at the camp.
Which is not the case at the camp.
Right.
So initially, let me scrub it down a little bit, but I'm thinking those things probably don't meet the definition of requiring such a permit.
Okay. Just things to think about. Again,
Yeah.
we're looking at
Absolutely.
gathering large numbers of people in one
Sure,
place.
and you want to make sure that if you have to comply, you have to comply. I get that. And that's why I wanted to have a little flow-through with you on what exactly the events were that you're referencing to see how that may fit in.
The campers have to be registered to be there, obviously.
Yeah,
But all
private,
camps,
it's all
but-
private, though. It's a private deal, And they may be inviting campers and such. So I'm not sure that they would fit within that. I think Colonel Lowe's got his hand raised. He's going to say, well, those fall into the category of want to know. Is likely his comment, irrespective of that. So, I understand. I wanted to facilitate a little development of that. Thank you.
So just for the public's knowledge, we went down this road and drafted and are in the process of adopting this ordinance for the safety of the people who come to visit Tabernacle in large numbers and for the safety of Tabernacle residents. We've had events in the past where our OEM coordinator, our fire company, our rescue company, and our EMS were not aware that there was an event in town. And, you know, it just makes sense that they should be aware, and there should be a plan of how to protect them people, those people that come to the event, and the people putting the event on, that if there is an incident, and if there's an incident action plan, how to respond to that. At our last meeting, we were here during the Finance Festival. And the Finance Festival has been going on for 25 years. But they had a glitch with this corner while we were here. The deputy mayor pointed it out. There was no one at this corner. There were no lights on the corner. So yes, we do have to monitor because we got to protect the public and make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do. And that if there's a police officer at that corner, he needs to be at the intersection, not in his car, helping people across the street and direct them across the street. And that they, so, you know, fortunately, Colonel Lowe, I thank you for bringing this to our attention because we have had many large groups in this town without our knowledge. And this gives us a way to control those events. And as our attorney said, this is when the public is invited. This is not when the church has an event for themselves, where they have a church service, where they do something special for themselves. It's when Holy Eucharist turns it into a Finance Festival and they invite large numbers of the public to come. That's what this ordinance is about. Colonel, did you have something you want to say?
Do you want me to go back up there, or do I? Can I speak again?
Well, I want you, since you're our former OEM coordinator and you are a deputy OEM coordinator, you know, you have a right to respond to this because, you know, this was, while it wasn't offered by you, you had major impetus and input into this ordinance.
I would point out that in Jacksonville, Florida, this weekend there was an incident. That's the kind of thing that we would like to see, that we at least know what's going on. And Keith is absolutely correct, wherever you live. Keith's absolutely correct. Do we want to get a full plan on what's going to go on at Pine Tree or whatever? It would be nice to know. And it's not unusual when there was going to be a major, whatever TAA does when they do the trials with the baseball and all that kind of stuff, where they're expecting a couple of 300, 400 people to come to these things, and me to go to the state police, and they had no idea that thing was going to go on. It would be nice for them to know what the risk is, know what the exposure is, at least to be advised. Like I say, I have some problems with the $75 fee. I don't know why you would charge a fee for a notification. If that's what's going to do, to force the notification, then I'm okay with it. What I'm really interested in is exactly what you said. Tell somebody. It's just like you see something, you say something. You're going to have an event, at least we'll know it's going to go on.
Because there are targets to that, as you said.
Anytime you have a large group of people, tabernacle tree lighting ceremony, you have a potential target. What would be a better target than a place like Tabernacle? Low risk for the people putting on the threat, high value in media, and we don't even know it's going to happen. We don't even know that the event is going to happen, that anybody even took it into consideration. I don't know about all the forms, I don't know about $75, but I sure would like somebody to pick up the phone and call OEM and say, did you know we're going to have? Thank you.
Mr.
Any other questions for the public?
As the guy who's going to have to discuss all these permits with folks, I completely agree with the Colonel in terms of the first aspect of public safety, which is notification, recognition of the risks and hazards that this presents to the public safety. The other part of the process isn't forcing people to have a comprehensive plan for their event, but it's sitting down with emergency management and making sure that the attendees as well are going to be attending under safe circumstances, proper egress, access for emergency vehicles, sanitary facilities, support, lighting, and if something's going wrong, we know who to contact to get it addressed in a rapid manner, like we did with the Finance Festival. A couple minutes, that was fixed, but we knew who to call. So that enables us not only to watch out for the risk management, notify the appropriate parties, but also make sure we ensure public safety as well. And not trying to make it a big deal for people, just have a good discussion about how we're going to run the event. Thank you.
Anyone else for the public? Mrs. Brooks?
Yes, thank you. Just, Cranbrooks, Morris Meadow Road. I don't know whether $75 is the right number or the wrong number, but it is an effort to, where people are gonna have to put in time. Mr. Sunbury is gonna have to put in time, and there has to be some compensation for that time that he puts in. So there has, even though $75 may not be the right number, but still there does need to be some kind of cost for the permit. And the other point about it is that, yes, I saw that penalty section, and you're right to point it out, Mayor, but what the penalty section doesn't do, it doesn't really address the circumstance where you discover after or when the event starts up that these people really did need a permit. And you have no one monitoring, you haven't called in the relevant people in order to, do that good public safety work. So you might want to think about doing something, putting some language in here that retroactively, I mean, I don't know how to write it, but surely Mr. Lang would be able to write the language, just so the township is protected. That's it. Thank you.
And when we did talk about the fee, in government, we're not permitted to make profit off of fees. It's to cover our costs. And that's where the $75 came from. We thought that that was probably the right number to cover the cost for the amount of time that the professionals need to review the application. And if it's that big an event, and the public's being invited, and they're contributing, it's a very small amount. Yet it gives us a level of comfort from a public safety perspective that we know what's going on, and God forbid if something goes wrong, we can act accordingly. Anyone else comments on this ordinance? Well, you already had a comment.
I have, well, so have others.
I know, and that was my mistake, I apologize for that. But anyone else have a comment?
I'll offer that comment right here.
Anyone else have a comment? Okay, we're going to close the comment portion of this ordinance. With a motion? So moved. Second?
I'll second, but I'd like to make some modifications to this. I think we might be overthinking this a little bit. And it can be simplified relatively easily. The thing I want to point out is the event management plan required, letter D in the proposed ordinance. This plan shall be approved by the Township Office of Emergency Management. Now, it doesn't specify what form the plan needs to be submitted by. It doesn't say specifically it needs to be 15 pages, it needs to be charts and graphs, that type of thing. All it says is that the plan shall be approved by the Township Office of Emergency Management. Bob Sunbury today put together a form, which is pretty simple. It outlines guidelines, and it's pretty simple stuff. Name of group representative, telephone, address, township service requested, which I think is really good. Start time, end time, and a signature. And at the very bottom, it says for Tabernacle Township official use only, fee paid $75. I think this is pretty simple because it puts the attention and it puts responsibility of the Office of Emergency Management. And it clearly indicates it in the ordinance, that it's their responsibility to approve the plan. You've got an application, it's got a lot of the pertinent information that he needs to know. It's a matter of picking up the telephone and talking to whomever over at Pine Tree or whomever over at Delanco, the emergency management folks over at Seneca, the church, the school. It opens up the dialogue for Bob to have with anybody that's putting an event together. But I do want to point this out, and this is something that I'd like to see taken out. I don't think we need to specify and have these exemptions for special events, which is the paragraph, I guess it would be letter B, the last paragraph of letter B. Special event does not include any funeral procession, educational activities under the direction. I think we need to eliminate that paragraph completely, not have any exception. I think if you're having an event, I'm sorry? It's here. It's in the one I have, and I've got it
But I'm
crossed.
saying that's, if you remember, that's the reason why I did not vote, because it was recommended that
I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, much less what
Just
I
saying.
vote on this. But I will say to you that I think we need to eliminate that. But I also don't know that we need the $75 fee. So I think by at least having this in place to where it brings the parties to the table, we have an awareness of the events that are going on. I don't know that we need to charge for it. I don't know that we don't. I don't know if the 75 is the right number or not either. If we want to do a nominal fee to cover the cost of printing the form, $25 is probably suffice, because I don't think we're going to get a lot of these. We're going to have some. But my recommendation is to eliminate the special event paragraph and reduce the amount from 75 down to 25. And as long as Mr. Yates is comfortable with that, those modifications, I will second this. If not, then I'll second.
Let's look at what we're eliminating. So we're saying if there's a funeral procession of 300 people, they have to fill this out. If there's an educational activity under the direction and supervision of the school, they would have to fill this out if there's 300 people there. And these are the things we're excluding, right? Possession, sanctioned, or approved by a government agency, including but not limited to Tabernacle Township, and the subdivisions, the school boards, the fire company, EMS, while acting within the scope. Weddings, processions arising out of labor disputes, processions sponsored by house of religious worship. So if we take that out, Stephen, then it means anybody has anything that has 300 people, they have to comply with this.
That would include games that are conducted at the school then at that point? You know, football games, any kind of big lacrosse game, whatever.
Well, if that's the case, okay, let's walk through that a little bit. Let's say, for example, you've got, George, how many home games is Seneca? 4? George still here?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
How many games do you have at Seneca?
I think it's 6 this year.
Okay, so with that being said, since it's a reoccurring event, I would make an exception for a reoccurring event the same year. What's got to happen is George has got to sit down, and Dave has got to sit down with, and Bob has got to sit down with the folks at Seneca and say, okay, here's what our game plan is for football.
But can't they do that irrespective of this ordinance? Here you have ongoing activities at the school which are regular and expected. Mr. Sunbury and your public safety director would be expected on some level to coordinate with them irrespective of whether there was an ordinance. So I wouldn't think that those things would need to be covered in the ordinance because that's something they know is going to be happening all the time. And I'm sure that they would be proactive in reaching out to the school and dealing with something like that. I think this is supposed to capture the one-offs. And so I would ask you to consider recognizing that maybe you don't need to regulate the school football games and gatherings at the school because you're going to be involved in regulating them just by the presence, the sheer presence of the officers and the Department of Public Safety. And if they're proactive, they'll cover those issues with them. And if there are issues or disagreements, they'll bring them to the attention of the Township Committee, because I don't think it's the committee's intention to require the school board to get a permit, whether there's a fee or not, for every football game or lacrosse game or other activity conducted at the school, including potentially graduation and so forth. These are events that occur every year, they're known events, and I'm not sure that that was at the inception the intent of this ordinance. I think your Mr. Lee's intention somewhat in bringing it up in response to the Colonel's suggestion was, as the Colonel indicated earlier tonight, to make sure that those one-off, those limited number of events that are expecting large crowds, like he explained with respect to the baseball tournament, don't occur without some advanced planning and knowledge on the part of the public safety people involved, and including the state police. But football games, church events, mass, religious services, these are all things that go on all the time with regularity and may not need to be regulated because you already have officers, you already have public officials in charge of making sure that those events on a regular basis are conducted in such a way that the public is protected. And again, you don't want to be over-inclusive because you don't want to burden these organizations and you don't want to making it a permit to have a football game. I'm sure that's what we'll hear from the public. That's something that I'm sure Mr. Sunbury and Mr. Liston are likely going to insert themselves into, if need be, irrespective of whether there's an ordinance.
Mayor, just to let you know, on that form, two things. A, the high school has its own emergency management department that I've been meeting with and coordinating with. So you're right, they have their own reporting requirements. What we need to know is so fire, EMS, and emergency management knows. On that form, if you notice, I stuck a tax ID field in there because I did research on our surrounding municipalities. They charge about $50 for this type of permit for profit organizations. For nonprofits, they allow the ability to waive those fees if somebody provides their tax ID number. I put it on just in case you find that convenient. Did some research, wanted to give you the feedback on the fees. I'll leave it to your capable hands.
So, Mr. Lee, I understand when you say you don't think the exceptions should be in there. I get that. You want everybody to be included in making sure that Colonel Lowe's intentions with respect to nothing happening that's a target, that's unknown, happens. But I don't think that excluding them from this ordinance would prevent that coordination with respect to the school and the other people that are exempt, because as I see it, educational activities under the direction of the school authorities, possession sanctioned by government agency, but not limited to Tabernacle and its subdivision, the school boards, the fire company, the EMS. These are things that are going to be regulated and discussed without the necessity for a permit, you would think. Is that correct, Mr. Sunbury?
I believe so.
So again, I understand, Mr. Lee, where you're coming from. But if you leave the exceptions in, then what you're saying is they don't need a permit.
I made it pretty clear how I felt.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't really want to debate it all night. I made it pretty clear what my thoughts were. The bottom line is that we need to get anybody that has a large event in town, we've got to get them in front of the OEM coordinator. Because I can tell you right now, I made my point. We need to understand, and our OEM coordinator needs to understand what's happening at Seneca, what's happening at Tabernacle School, what's happening over at, with the softball tournament, over at Patty Boker. There needs to be an awareness, and this is a step in that direction. If we want to debate and go back and forth and whatnot, that's fine. But I made it pretty clear that I think that needs to, and Colonel O is one that just said it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had a problem with the exceptions.
Yeah.
He said that.
Well,
as do I.
And I understand the merit in that. Maybe you would, as you indicated, indicate that those things that are going to be reoccurring events obtain a permit for the reoccurring event, and then thereafter don't need a permit.
Well, it goes back to the line I mentioned 15 minutes ago. This plan shall be approved by the Township Office of Emergency Management. It's up to their discretion what they approve and what they don't.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And what form the report's in. It's pretty simple. And the report, the paper that Bob did is actually very good. I think it's very informative.
Are you suggesting that we maybe include reference to that form and eliminate detailed reference to what should be included in the plan, leaving that to the discretion of the officers? Or did you want to reference the form and leave as a tool those enumerated items concerning what should be considerations in granting such a permit?
Well, I didn't receive a hard copy of this until this evening, so I can't really comment on that right now.
Yeah, Stephen, that doesn't cover all 8 items that are in the ordinance. It's a good step forward.
I will be covering them now.
I don't know. I didn't put it there.
So Bob, if you got the form filled out by an entity that was seeking such a permit, you would, irrespective of whether it was listed here in the ordinance, you'd be looking at these items and be able to look at the nature of the event that's proposed, and then speak and tailor-make your conversation and interaction with that entity based upon whether or not these items are germane to your consideration of that event.
That's literally my template for discussion.
So even if they took it out of the ordinance and just included the form that would be required to get the permit, you'd be going back and looking at these items comparing it to what's being proposed, and if you felt, and this ordinance would give you the authority, that they should provide more information on public health management or emergency management coordination or traffic and pedestrian management, then you'd be able to have that interaction with them based on that form, and not necessarily make those applicants feel like they're being overburdened with this list of things that they have to address, because some of those events, it may not make sense for them to have any significant consideration of, for example, traffic and pedestrian management.
The idea is just to make sure that they're going to have a safe, successful event.
Can I please interject something? Couldn't the form just trigger a meeting between emergency management and the person that's having the event? You walk them through what they need, they tell you what they have, and you get it covered. I think this is being so overthought, it's ridiculous. And I think at the bottom, your form's great, but I think you have to strike the last thing from the bottom, because you have them providing $1 million policy to the township. No one's going to be buried in Tabernacle, I'm telling you now, because if someone's got to provide a rider, meaning the township, with a $1 million rider, so they can bury their loved one, I don't think it's happening.
That's to protect and indemnify the township from risk of somebody, and I didn't put that in there.
I get that, but that's someone's private property. I mean, and these are events happening on township private properties, you're saying. The township, why does the township have to be indemnified for having a...
Events on public property?
But this is, it's all part of the application, that's what I'm saying. So you have to be careful with what we put. If we can't require someone to give it to us, we shouldn't have it on there. But I think really it's being so overthought that it should really come down to this triggers a meeting with emergency management, and whomever else would be necessary for the meeting, you put the plan together, everybody's done. And it's, I don't think it needs to be that intense. I think it comes back to what the Colonel said. People just need to know, hey, this is happening. We can give you some suggestion. You need a fire truck there, you need an ambulance there, whatever it is.
Here's what the plan is.
Exactly. I don't think, I think it's just being so overthought, and we're just running in circles right now, chasing our tail.
Mr. Mayor, could we possibly table this and send this back to Peter to have revisions made along the lines of what Stephen and Kim just said? I think we all understand now that the intent of notification, and I think in order to put that in here right now and then try and sort that out and make it sensible to vote on is going to take some more time. I'd rather just see this thing tabled for the next meeting and allow Peter to have a shot at incorporating some of the thoughts that he heard tonight, not only from Stephen and Kim, but also from Colonel Lowe and Bob.
Mr. Brandon, I appreciate that. That's kind of where we ended the last time. And so I've gotten that feedback now. Could I take a moment and sort of do a straw poll with the committee so I could have some direction on some of these issues? Steve, are you in favor, and would be the rest of the committee support eliminating the application fee or maintaining the application?
I'm going to rescind my second, and I'm going to second Rick's motion to table this. But we're not going to have this discussion tonight.
All right.
At least I'm not.
All right, well then I would invite
Rick's made it clear what he thinks we need to do as a committee. I have a lot of respect for Rick. I'll withdraw my second on the approval for the ordinance, and I'll second his motion to, unless you, I'm assuming you made one.
I think Yates made the motion.
I'm rescinding my second.
I'm going to rescind your first.
I'll rescind my motion.
You're going to make a motion.
And I'll second Rick's motion
just
to
have to
table.
ask for a motion to table, and then under Roberts we'll go ahead.
And Rick has done that, I believe. I'll second that.
Yeah. Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
I'd just like to end that, please, by reminding the committee for me to formulate changes. I need to understand what people's concerns and how they would like to do. If you could provide me some direction individually in that regard, I'll consider it, and providing a draft and then potentially even alternate provisions aimed at building a consensus as to how we get to a final product.
I'll send you some thoughts.
Thank you.
I already have two.
Yes, you have. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, could I try to speed the meeting up.
And just,
Since I have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, we've only gotten through 8 things on the agenda, and it's almost 9 o'clock.
Second reading ordinance 2018-4, an ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 7 traffic, revising Section 7-19 entitled speed limits to limit vehicle speed along new road. This is a public hearing on this ordinance. It is open up to the public. Anyone from the public like to comment on this ordinance? Basically, this ordinance would reduce the speed limit from 532 to Mallard Drive to 35 miles an hour, except when the school signs are flashing and children are present, it would be 25 in that area. Okay, seeing no one from the public, or close the public portion. So motion?
So moved.
second.
Okay. Any discussion? None? Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, under new business, this ordinance for first reading is being struck because we do not have that ordinance. We heard our public safety director has the authority he's looking for to form the task force, to hopefully come up with a joint rescue between fire and EMS. So that's going to be struck from the agenda. Resolution 2018-87, authorizing the execution of a contract renewing membership in the Bryan County Joint Insurance Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2018-88, adopting the form of the New Jersey Tort Claims Act. Questionnaire required to be utilized by claimants for the filing of notices of tort claim against Tabernacle Township.
So moved.
Okay. Second. Kim, you had it first, right?
Yes, I did. Rick seconded.
Oh, Rick second, I'm sorry, roll call.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes, resolution 2018-89, we all received the new personnel policies and procedures with the changes noted. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes, resolution 2018-90, adopting a procedure for making public the minutes of closed sessions.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
I have a comment.
Yes.
They need to include the mayor in that subcommittee.
So Mayor, or Mr. Lee is suggesting that the MRC, first of all, I should indicate that this is being proposed to be proactive at the suggestion of the clerk to try to formalize this process in some way and elicit public comment or otherwise concerning the intentions included herein. But Mr. Lee is suggesting that the mayor be added to the MRC. Right now it provides for the administrator, the township attorney, and the clerk to regularly review the minutes of closed session meeting minutes. And I think Mr. Lee is indicating he'd like the mayor to be added to that composition.
First committee okay with that?
Fine. Amend my motion.
So we'll amend
Include that
it.
change.
Second.
Second by Yates?
By second.
Second by anybody.
Joe still says yes.
Joe still says yes.
We had a motion, we had a second, we had a discussion, we had a change, and we still have the same first and second, correct?
Correct.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Yates? I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes, resolution 2018-92, approving the 2017 contribution for LoSAP.
So moved.
Can we skip one? 91? Back
Yeah,
to
I'll
plan?
go back, I'll go back. Let's do.
I'll rescind my motion.
Okay. Resolution 2018-91, adopting the corrective action plan, did we just do that?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2018-92 approving the 2017 contribution for LoSAP.
So moved. Did you not ask me to hurry up?
Roll call.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the second?
Rick?
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates? Mayor Gordon?
Yes. 2018-93 award of contract for 2018 park project.
So moved.
Dan, you want to talk about that?
Bids were received last month for the park project, which is basically finishing up the dugouts. Project that we started last park grant project, and also a couple of picnic pavilion just over the existing pads that both the patty boat are in that.
Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes, resolution 2018-94 approving the sale of property.
So moved.
Second.
Doug, do you want to review, we sold 2 and we repaid 3?
Yes, we did.
And the remaining 3, why did they not sell them?
No, we
No one did, okay. That's what we're doing.
We'll talk with the attorney and see what our next move is, and be back to the committee.
Okay. Okay, roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates? Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Resolution 2018-95 authorizing Tabernacle Township to enter a shared service agreement with Chemung Township to utilize the Tabernacle truck water.
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yep.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates? Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Resolution 2018-96 authorizing the post of the temporary signs in the public right-of-way for Tabernacle Community Fall Festival.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? None. Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Parade permit for the Pinelands Preservation Alliance, date 10/7/2018.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes.
Joe, I just need to ask a quick question. Is Bob, you obviously are aware of this and will be talking to these people?
Yeah, and they don't even have a rest stop in this town. It's just a continuous bike ride passing through.
Thank you.
Okay, we also have listed for discussion New Jersey reforms to bonding requirements under the municipal land use law.
Mayor, I can make quick work of that. We are preparing an ordinance based on modifications to the statute. There is some refining of what's going to be considered an on-site and off-site improvement. So we should have a proposed ordinance for consideration at the next meeting. And remember, that was essentially change the ordinance to indicate that the bonding of on-site improvements is no longer required. It was always a curious topic for many years, but clearly that law requires that modification. So we're refining, in light of some suggestions from DCA, that language, and we'll have an ordinance ready for consideration at the next meeting. Does Dan want to comment on that?
No, I think basically this, anything that's going to eventually become a public improvement, so like a subdivision where we have roads and sidewalks will eventually be public improvements, that's still bonded. This is really just to eliminate the bonding requirement for site plans for private development and building a small commercial building.
And Dan, how does that affect, in your mind, the stormwater detention facilities that may be on site?
So it won't have to be bonded any longer. The construction of that, but that doesn't mean that they still are responsible for maintaining it, and they still have to go through the land use procedure, and all the approvals are made, and they have to comply with the both the Pinelands requirements as well as the state requirements for stormwater management.
So the Land Development Board needs to be reminded that when these issues arise, that they have to take appropriate precautions, knowing that there's going to be no bonding associated with on-site stormwater detention.
Correct. There is some exceptions to that, I'm sure you're familiar with, but if there's anything with respect to buffering or any certain conditions of improvement, of approval, that can be bonded.
Because they could fail to follow the conditions and then there'd be, have to be act by the public. The same could be true with respect to stormwater detention. So is the LDB taking some precautions like requiring covenants and restrictions in the lots that belong, not putting those facilities on separate lots and those kinds of things?
Yeah, and that's really independent of this current change. That was changed several years ago where a stormwater management basin, in other words, for development, burden couldn't be to put that basin on one person's lot and have them solely responsible for it if it serves the entire development.
So it ends up on a private lot, right? A separate
Ends up on a private lot, on an open space lot, or a lot controlled by a homeowners association.
Correct, and it becomes the obligation of the homeowners association?
Correct. Similarly, if
those
it's private
covenants and restrictions are being required as conditions to be recorded in the chain of title?
yes, in the case of a subdivision, yes.
Thank you. Okay, reports. Dan, do you have anything to report?
Just a couple things. Carranza Road was talked a lot about this evening. We do have that discretionary grant that we're ready to apply. I did circulate, as requested by the committee, estimates to follow through with paving Carranza Road all the way down to Washington Township. Assuming you've reviewed those, it's over $2 million to extend the paving down that far, and I just need direction as to whether or not you want me to amend the application to include that additional portion of Carranza, or to just stick with what we had initially prepared, which was basically down to the tracks just beyond the line.
Okay, I'm going to poll the committee and we'll give you direction on garbage street right now. Joe, your thoughts?
So it's an additional $2 million?
That's a little over $2 million.
And I say we stay with the original plan.
Would it make sense to talk to the Washington Township and the state about, here's what the cost is going to be? What do you think? That was part of the initial inquiry that I had made, was that if we do this, it ought to be in conjunction with Washington Township and the state. Did we do any of that? At least see if there's interest at all?
Our office did not talk to the state or Washington Township about this. We got the numbers together so you guys can discuss how you want to proceed.
I think it's irresponsible to just decide to do it or not. It's not a Tabernacle issue. It's there was a couple references to where the road goes. Yeah, we all know where Carranza Road goes, but my point is, if we're making this much of an effort to pave Carranza Road, this is the only time we're going to probably even do it in the next 75 years. There's no real care. But I think as long as we've gotten Southampton, as long as we've gotten Chemung and the state to the table, let's at least say, is there any interest from Washington? Is there any interest from the state to do this, from DEP to do this? We can't just ignore the road because it's out in an area which is not popular. It's a major road when it comes to enforcement. I think we at least ought to see Washington Township and the state before we abandon it.
Steve, are you looking for the state to fund this, and if they don't fund it, or are we going to destroy it?
At least ought to have a discussion with them and say, are there any thoughts about it?
But if Washington says, yes, we're interested in funding it, and the state says, that's good, but we're not going to fund it, or...
Well, it doesn't matter because we haven't talked to them. What's the point of guessing? We haven't talked to
I'm
them.
just trying to determine what would be our cost if we go down this road. Are we going to incur costs, or are we just looking for the state to cover it?
We're not going to know until we talk.
Rick, you comment?
I think, the original idea of the discretionary funds was the fund that's that part of Carranza Road, and that's what the discussions were with the assembly people about, I believe. So I think we don't really want to modify that, but I think down the road, Stephen suggested.
Is that a fund?
Yeah, a bad one. It's probably a progressive thing to do. Let's just find out. What's the state's intent? I mean, we've always maintained that's a state road. through the mayor. I think it could be brought up again with the right state officials, but separate and apart from what we're talking about now with the grant.
It won't get done if you don't, I mean, if you don't ask and you don't have the discussion now, it'll never. And frankly, I'd be very satisfied if the road was never paid, personally. But I think if, with...
I think that's probably the best thing in the long run.
Maybe. I think at the very least, I think you still need to have a discussion. I think you at least say to the legislative group that we've talked to, say, hey, what do you think about this? What are the plans for DEP for this road? Because that's what's going to really come down to. And at least have the dialogue. So we've thought about it. And if they say, no, we'd rather not do it because of A, B, C, D, then fine. I'm okay with that. But at least have a dialogue before we make a commitment to paving part of the road. I think the initial thought that we were given, or the initial feedback, was we're only going to pave it to a certain distance, and we had to push to get to the railroad tracks, which is what's paved now anyway. I mean, how stupid can that be? I mean, that's just stupid not to do it to at least to the railroad track.
Joe, you still where you work? Do you want to engage the Washington Township and the state and make the buy bigger? Or do you want to stay with what we have and pursue it at a later date?
Well, what Stephen and Rick have brought up, I mean, they got valid points. I mean, if they don't explore the possibility now, we may not get that opportunity. I mean, right now, we know we can pave it all the way up to Coron's Memorial at the railroad track. So I would entertain the idea of approaching Washington Township and see.
Okay. Dave, you want to talk to Washington Township? Interested in?
Would like you to reach out to Washington Township?
About paving that further?
I will attempt to get a hold of somebody at Washington Township and see if there's any interest in that. As far as the state, Mr. Lee, who with the state did you want to contact regarding that?
I'll get you the information. If not,
Okay, so we'll reach out and I'll see if I can get some feedback from Washington Township. And then we can talk about this, I guess, next week.
Anything else, Steve?
Just a couple quick updates. The drainage project and the road program that we're doing this year, the drainage project is, I believe, going to be advertised next week, so we should have hopefully have bids for you next month. And the road program, we're just waiting for a DOT authorization to go out to bid. That includes that phase 1 of Grants Road. That's all I had.
Thank you. Mr. Fred?
We met with South Jersey Gas the other day. They are putting forth an expansion in Tabernacle Township. A 3-phase expansion starting at New Road and moving out towards Suey Place Road. The first phase will be up to the bridge at the creek on Powell Place Road, including back Patty Broker zone and where they've left off coming in from Washington Way. And it'll be the subdivisions around Fox Chase Road and Powell Place Road up to the bridge. Phase 2 will be the Powell Place Road out to El Dorado and the subdivisions over each side of that. And phase 3 will be to the out Suey Place Road.
So towards Holly Park?
Towards Holly Park.
Okay.
Holly Park and out towards
Suey Road?
Yes, out towards, at least that's the proposal.
So that's pretty much the whole eastern side?
The whole eastern side up until Southampton Township, because PSEG has their DS in that. They are looking to put a public information meeting together somewhere after the 10th of September, and they will be advertising that. It will probably be here at Town Hall, and they will be going door to door. They are in the final process of registering all their agents to be registered. They will have a badge from South Jersey Gas when they come to the door, and the vehicles will be private vehicles, but they will have a placard in the window saying South Jersey Gas, and then they will be going soliciting door to door with hang tags and interviews and personal views.
So the outreach meeting that they want to do here, are they going to be unveiling to all those people? Because if all of them came, we would not be able to fit them all here.
No.
Are we expecting more than 300 people?
I mean, we may have to make arrangements.
We may have to make arrangements.
They're going to do it in phases, though. That contacting people as they go, so they're not going to do everything all at once. We're going to do it by sections.
But is there outreach plan for everyone in one shot to say this is what's coming over the next 3
They
years?
did not give me that total information.
Okay.
I will nail that down, and it'll be on our website.
So did you say phase one, they're going down New Road to Fox Chase?
Continuing down New Road down towards Fox Chase and Wimbledon Way, West Patty Boger. They also have lines in Washington Way and Ashley. They'll be connecting them up Patty Boger Road and continuing that so they can connect so they'll have their backup loop. And then they'll add Zimmerman Road in there, Sawmill, those roads. Basically all the subdivisions all the way over to the bridge on Powell Place Road.
So they're bypassing one development to get to another?
No, they're going from the end of the line, which is on New Road, and the end of their line, which is at Patty Boger, basically at the ball field. And they're connecting those all together and running them up until Powell Place Road. So when they get to the bridge, they will have everything connected between where they are now and where they're.
Right now, I believe they're in Mallard Drive.
They're past Mallard. Both past Mallard. So they're starting there and connecting, running their main. And they're picking up their main off of Washington Way where it comes out to Patty Boger. And then they're adding Zurich, which they had bypassed originally. And coming back up there and making the interconnection so they have a backup for all those areas.
Yeah, I'd like to see a map of that, because you got me a little confused, because you said TSNG came in the opposite way for Southampton.
They will not be going into Southampton, no. They don't have that jurisdiction. TSNG is that. So they will end at our township line.
So they're going to put a T?
They're going to dead end it right there, the same way they do it on my street.
Okay.
Do you have the timeframes for the 3 phases?
I do not as of yet. The first phase is they hope to complete, I'm going to say, they won't guarantee by winter, but that's their goal.
They want that heating look, right? They want the heating look.
Yeah, I just went out and bought a brand new oil furnace too.
Now, if we can just get Comcast to cooperate.
So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Lang?
I would just save my time for executive session if I could be brief with the committee for just a few minutes.
Committeeman Yates?
I have nothing new to report.
Committeeman Francis?
Pass.
Deputy Mayor Whit?
Thanks for the comments regarding the public notice for the events. Bob, thanks for working on this. Colonel O, I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention because it's a lot farther along our discussion we've ever had, so I really appreciate that. I wanted to mention, I just was looking at my phone here to find out when I got notification from Verizon, but on July 2nd, they indicated to us that they had 34 approved service deposits and 1-year service commitments from residents of Tabernacle. We are required to have 35. They are required to have 35 before they do anything. On that date, they indicated that they had 5 checks that they were due to be deposited, and provided all those checks cleared, they would have received 39 deposits and service contracts from Tabernacle residents. So, just for argument's sake, if we say that was in August, we'll give them a month. By April, Verizon is mandated by their BFRR agreement that they have to provide internet service, high-speed internet service to those 39 residents. So the clock is ticking for Verizon. I indicated to them in an email that I sent on Thursday of last week, asking for an update on where we were, because these residents have had checks that are clear at this point, and money's come out of their account. We don't have the indication of what's going on. So I mentioned at that point that we had 40 houses that are coming to Tabernacle potentially on the Seneca Woods, and I'd like to hear something. So hopefully I'll have something to report at the September meeting. But I just wanted to communicate publicly that we've reached our goal in terms of what we need to do, which is a matter of Verizon getting it executed. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
You're keeping your thumb on fire.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go to executive session for matters related to litigation and the attorney-client privileges. Fran Brooks versus
Can we do a public comment?
document number BUR-L-001048-18 and docket number BUR-L-001298-20. And when we come back, we will do public comment. May or may not take action, and then we will.
So we won't be able to ask Mr. Guzzi any questions about the grant that's going in, or it's hard to understand what you're actually doing with the discretionary money. It's suddenly now we're to the railroad tracks, we have no, I mean, it's a mess. Sorry, but it's a mess.
All the professionals meet here for public comment.
Motion and second to go into executive session.
Okay, so,
Sorry, I didn't get a second.
we're going back to the old form. That's just fine, guys. Listen, I got all the time in the world.
Branson.
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates? Mayor Martin?
We're going to executive session.